All right. Selected desktop was not found. I love this stuff. We are back. I'm just going to restart ScreenFlow so I can, just in case something happens, we can start this off again. There we go. All right. We're back. It's COMP123, and it's summer 2016. It's programming 2, of course, and it's week 3, part 3, right? So we're sitting at Friday. Some short reminders for next week. First of all, you know that we have a, tonight, we have a lab number 2 that's due by midnight. That's due tonight. We've done part of it together. We'll try and do the other part together too, right? I'll try and get through most of it, and there might be some pieces that you have to do on your own. That's okay. Again, it's only worth 2% of your final grade, but please don't discard it, or disregard it, I should say, because it's something that we need. You know, it's good practice for you to help you with your assignment. Remember that we have an assignment also, and if I was going to pull up assignments, we have the hero class assignment that we're building. So I'm bringing that up for a second so we can look at that very quickly again. Remember that this is due Friday, June 3rd. So not obviously today, but next week, right? So it's not a lot of time, and you got some stuff to output. It's very similar to the structure that we're using today, but with additional properties and methods. And we haven't really talked methods yet, but we will. So this is due next week, Friday, Friday at midnight. Also, please be advised that next week, as normal, because this week is our lab week, next week is our quiz week, that we'll have a short quiz on Friday between, you know, the morning, when we start off between 10:30 and 10:40. So if you come in late, you'll only have 8 minutes. If you come in 2 minutes late, like now, please be on time, if not a little early. That'll give you a chance to do your quiz and have 10 minutes. Remember that there's only going to be 5 to 6 questions on your quiz, and it's always going to be based on the stuff we did this week, as an example, and a little bit of next week if we have a chance. So mostly this week we've been talking about objects and classes, so guaranteed we're going to have questions about objects and classes and things that we've talked about already. Like, for example, what's a private instance variable? Why the whole idea of making private instance variables and public properties? What's the difference between an instance variable and a property? They look very similar, but they're not, right? What are you know, get accessor methods and set accessor methods? You should know these things. This is all you know, kind of part of our new language that we're talking about here, right? When you learn object-oriented programming, there comes a whole set of new words. The idea of instantiation. The word instantiate, what does it mean? It means to create an object. That's what it means, right? You need to know these things, and I may ask you a smattering of some of those questions, you know, on your quiz. There's a lot of stuff I could ask, and we're going to continue to work with object-oriented programming and design over the next 3 weeks, not just this week, but next week and the week after, because each week has a separate theme. For example, polymorphism and inheritance. We're going to talk about those concepts as well, but you need to understand conceptually, you know, all these things about object-oriented as well as practically be able to use it, right? So those kind of two things together, it's hard. Remember that tonight we've done this person class. We've created a name string. We need to create an, you know, that's check. Think about, let's just check this off for the lab tonight, right? We need to do the age integer. We've created a person class that includes a public property name. We've done that, check, right? The person class has to have 2 methods, x, we didn't do those yet, right? Ensure that all private instance variables start with an underscore character, check, we did this. Public properties and methods start with a capital letter, so far, check. A new person object will be you know, created in the driver class, named program, so far, check. A person object will call the say hello method, x, and then this is x, right? So we have a couple things to do still to make this work and to hand this in. So again, I recommend you follow along and use the stuff we do in class to hand it in. It's good practice for you to understand what to do anyway. Okay? Last day we were left off with this little class here, right, that we were working with. Just gonna undo this thing for a second. And so we can look at this thing. I'm going to bring it a little bit larger, not because I want to blind you with how big it is, but just to make it easier to see. So if you notice, we have a class person, and I'm using this comment style. We will modify this as we go forward, just to make it so that I'm teaching you this comment style because the same comment style applies to JavaScript, right? In some ways, right? So you learn JavaScript, you learn this comment style. When I talk about things in JavaScript with you in the future or in some other course you might be taking it, works nicely from a documentation perspective. But C# requires a couple of additional tags to activate the IntelliSense that I want to get out of this thing, right? So as an example, let's say I want to get some information from my methods. This is where it really comes into play. Like I want to really know this public string name, this getter and setter, what it's about, right? What I can do is I can activate this method with IntelliSense by using a little bit of XML. So we're going to put in a summary. This is just for C# now, so C# specific. And I'm going to take this summary tag, hear me here, and we're going to put it just below this description, right? Okay, so if I was to do this, notice that I'm just putting summary tags inside my comments, okay? It looks a little bit more cluttered, but remember, this can generate API documentation later on one day. So I go back to my program, and if I was to try it again, let's say I want to write the person, and I want to set the name of the person like this. Notice when I do that, if I start typing person dot, and if I start typing name, right? Notice how I get my comments right here. Look, this is the property of our name field, right? So everything I type in my comments appears in IntelliSense. That's pretty awesome, right? So that way we can actually share, almost create documentation that other people can use, right, when they use our classes and objects, as opposed to just commenting for ourselves. So that's why commenting is really important, right? It's going to become more important to you as we go forward with more assignments. I'm going to continue to add requirements for documentation, best practices. But one of the ones I want to change for today is this idea of adding a summary. It's just one little line that you add in. We normally only put it for methods. Like, for example, our main method, if we were going to instantiate this, we don't need it. For now, if we don't need it, leave it like this. But if we want IntelliSense, right, we want that code hinting to come up, we need to put this summary, these two summary tags in. It's really up to you, in the long run. But for now, because we're learning, I want you to do it this way. Properties and strings and names, there's other additional tags we can put in. I think I'd be really satisfied if it was just this for now. I think this is enough, honestly. You'll get a description of what these things do, along with the method signature. So if we were going to do that just for a second, just to fix this up, notice that I have a person, but I have two constructors. One constructor that's the default empty constructor. We talked about this. And I'm using method overloading. We talked about this last week as well with advanced methods and all that, right? So here's method overloading. We're using two constructors, the same name as the class. That's what constructors are all about, right? So when we use a constructor, we're calling this method the constructor. It means that, remember, what's the constructor? It gets called as soon as the person class, the object made from the person class is created, right? So remember, the class is just a blueprint. The person, the object that comes from the blueprint is created. And when it's created, the constructor method triggers or is called automatically, right? It's happened whether you want it or not. Once you write a constructor method, it happens. It gets called automatically. Well, that's good, but it gets called depending on how you construct the object. If you construct the object with the empty constructor, so no parameters, right? Then this constructor gets called. If you call if you create the object with a string parameter, then this constructor gets called, right? So we can comment the constructor by using this, summary XML, right? And we can just kind of put the XML around the constructors here. Bear with me while I do this so you can see what I'm talking about. Again, I'm just trying to enhance your experience here so you can understand what this all does. All we're doing when we create this documentation, right, is we create good IntelliSense once we've done this for our when we create objects. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. If I hover over the person, take a look. Now I get, not only do I get the constructor, but I also get my comments in here, right? Which is, this is the constructor that takes a name as a parameter and passes it to the underscore name private instance variable. It tells us right there. It actually exposes a lot more about the class than if we had written no comments, right? So it's good help for you to understand how you're using it, and good help for a person who's working with you to understand how this works. Yeah. I don't think so. I think it's just summary. Yeah. Although you could probably right-click and figure it out if you right-click and put summary. Also, you might see comments with triple forward slash comments instead of this comment style. Both equivalent. They work the same. Triple forward slash in this comment style. I'm keeping this comment style so that you can use it with JavaScript, right? So if you ever do JavaScript, it's kind of similar. Java uses this kind of comment style more than the other one. So that's why I want to kind of keep it so that if you do Java again, you've got the same kind of commenting style that you've got here. So it's not just, I've got more than one reason for doing this. It's not because I want to make you crazy with comments, right? But it also helps you slow down and understand the code a little bit more, right? All right, so we've talked about the person class, right? And I want to go to the PowerPoint just to show you how far we've gotten, right? So we've talking about this idea of, creating objects. And it says, declaring a class does not create actual objects. Remember we talked about this, because a class is a blueprint. That's all it is. There's no object. We can have a class, and yet nothing will ever, if we never use the class, nothing happens with it. We need to create an object of the class, right? So one thing to note is that an object is a reference type, which is different than a value type, which we talked about last week. And here we get an example of another class create employee, right? It's kind of weird. And notice that we have a main function here, main method, if you will. And in the main method, this is the driver class, right? And the driver class, I'm declaring a new employee called my assistant, and I'm using what? What's this constructor? It's the empty or default constructor that I'm using for the employee class, right? Now we don't know what other constructors are defined here, but this one is definitely here. Here's something else. Notice that I'm using my assistant with the dot accessor method and then some kind of call over here. If I see brackets like this, parentheses, after something that comes after the dot, we know most likely it's a method that we're calling, right? So this is how you method. You call a method of the object by chaining it with a dot, all right? All right, so if that's true, let's create a couple of methods and talk about methods for classes. So if I go back to my person class, we've got our constructor methods, and we've defined what they are. Let's create a couple of methods now to help us out. And remember, what we want to try and create is, what we want to try and create is the stuff that's inside of our lab 2 requirements, right? Which is, notice that we've got one parameter type, or one property that we've created already called name, and we have another private age private instance variable that we need to create. We haven't done that yet, but there's a couple of things we have to have here. One is say hello. So let's create this one because it's related to name. Okay, so say hello method. All right, so how do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to decide whether the method is going to be exposed to the outside world or not. Remember, there's two access modifiers that we typically use in classes for now. I only want you to think about two: private and public. Now there's others, but public and private are the ones I want you to think about this. If it's public, it's exposed outside of the class. If it's private, if I'm trying to instantiate an object, it won't be visible. Let me show you what I'm talking about again. So if I make a private method, that's, for example, I call, and I have to talk about the return type, just like we do with every other method we've ever made, right? So it's returning void right now, and I call this something called say hello. First of all, how do I name a private method? How do I name any private object inside my class? Underscore. That's our best practice, right? We also make it lowercase, right? So if I was going to make say hello, here's our method, and then in my say hello method, I don't know, I kind of say hello, something like, console.writeLine. In my console.writeLine, I can actually output something like, Tom says hello. We're going to modify this class in this method in a second, right? So if I want to say the name of the person says hello, how do I access the name instance variable? Here's my name instance variable. How do I access this inside of my method? Say hello. How do I do that? So there's examples already up above, right? How do I do it? I use the this keyword, right? I want you to think. Remember to use the this keyword. This. It kind of activates everything in my class, and if I do the dot with the this, take a look. These are all the things that are available to call upon, right, inside my class. So this dot underscore, and then I can use name, right? So the name of the person who's being created, this person, right? Plus, I'm concatenating here, right? Quotation mark, space, because I want to add a space after the name. So, and then says hello. Right? Maybe we made an exclamation mark there as well. How about that? Okay, good. So that's how we use this method. Let's do some simple documentation, right? And we're going to change it from private to public in a second, but I want to show you the difference, right? So here we go. We're going to use the documentation style, right? And this time we know we're going to need summary, so I might as well start typing it. So summary. And in my summary, I'm going to put in what this thing is about. This method outputs the underscore name value with says hello to the console. Guys and girls, this is what's going to come up in our IntelliSense now, right? All right, what else? I need to kind of indicate, from our best practices, it's an @ method. We're going to also say the name of the method is say hello. Okay. And also, oh, there we go. And also, it's return type. My returns, right? Returns void, right? So if I go to, put this in here, returns void. By the way, there's a different way of doing this with C# when we use the open and close brackets like this, the less than greater than signs, instead of these @ decorators. But for now, let's say that's one of the things we put in there. The other thing is, for our class, do we have any parameters that it takes? No. That's one thing. We don't have any parameters, right? And anything else we want to say here, we can kind of indicate for our little method. Okay. Okay. So we can save this thing, and let's see if it's available for us. So if I go out to my class, or out of my class into my driver class, which is the program.cs file, and I start wanting to use my says hello, and let's say we use person as an object. Here's my person object, right? And I'm going to say person dot, and do I see says hello there? No, because it's private. Private will not be exposed outside of the class. However, right? How about in the class itself? If I try and use says hello or say hello, right? I want to try and use this thing. By the way, should it be say hello or says hello? Let's take a look at what I've asked. Say hello, right, with a capital S, right? So should be say hello, but I mean, typically what I would rather have it say is says hello, right? I'll change that for you guys for your documentation. I'll modify this, and then same thing with the age, right? Says hello and shows age, not show age, right? I could say show age because person show age of the person is okay, right? That's fine too. All right. So it's going to be says hello, not say hello, right? Because that makes more sense. All right, so this is cool, but I want to use my says hello somewhere. I mean, I wrote a private method. Let's try and use it. Well, I can use it in a constructor or another method. So if I call the when I define a method that the constructor method that has a variable that's passing into it, that gets assigned the value of this local variable is being assigned to my my name instance variable. That's what this is, right? This is my private instance variable called name underscore name, right? I'm taking the value of the local variable that I'm passing into the parameter of my this constructor method. Here it is, right? And I'm passing the value inside the private instance variable that is defined at the top of my class right here, right? That's what I'm doing. So that is holding the data. Well, if I'm doing that here, it might be safe to call a method that I've defined down here, which is a private method. Let's try this out. How do I do that? I use the this keyword again, right? I say this dot, and notice that I can use the underscore says hello method. It's available inside my class, not outside my class. So I could do something like this, right? And it's totally legal to do that. Even though I've defined my method way down here, right? I can still call the method before it's defined, right? The reason why it's done this, by the way, in the old days, it would never function. This would cause all kinds of errors. In traditional C, you have to always declare all your methods first, all your functions, and then call them down here, right? But nowadays, with modern compilers, what they do is they parse the program first, hoist everything up to where it should be, so it defines methods first, and then you can call upon those methods. So the compilation process changes your code into bytecode so we can use it. And it looks for methods that are defined later, and then it makes them available when you're calling them, which can present problems, actually, because where you think you're putting your stuff is actually not where it's landing. It's kind of being repositioned later when it's in the compilation process. Okay, so that's one thing. So you could do this, but this is really quite, I mean, this would work okay for my person class. And this is my person class with the name that I'm passing into. And let's look at that. So if I was to run the program now, in this instance, I don't have to do this anymore, console.writeLine. Let's just comment it up for now. We're going to come back to this, right? And we'll comment this piece too, right? Just because we've done it twice. But notice, as soon as I instantiate my object, so all I'm doing here in my driver class, this main method of my driver class, I'm just instantiating my object, creating a new instance of the person class, right? Okay, but when I do this, and because I call my constructor, and because my constructor includes a call to my says hello method, it's going to write out Tom, or whatever the name is, says hello. Let's try this out. So we're going to go back here, save everything, and Control F5, run without debugging kind of idea. There's Tom says hello, right? So as soon as my object gets created, I call the says hello method, and Tom says hello. But this is not what we want, right? In the lab, well, we might want it at one time, but for our lab, this is not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a public method, which means I got to rename a couple things. One, when I do public methods, I need to use the public keyword. So this is going to be public. Second, when I use a public method, my says hello, the way I've named this thing is incorrect. I should say, by C# standards and Microsoft standards, capital S says hello, right? Why? Because says hello is going to be exposed as a method, and usually we make it capital like this. Okay, going back here, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Let's just kill this. We could make it, use this method as well, but we're not going to do that in our constructor. And we'll just save this. And what I want to do is in my program class, right? I'm going to kind of erase this stuff for a second, guys, just to make it more clear, so we have more clarity here. I've just declared an object. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call the method of that object, right? So it's person dot, and there it says hello, right? So if I double click on this, it allows me to use the method. And notice that it also calls for the method signature and tells me what it is because I commented it right. It says this method outputs the underscore name value with says hello to the console. That's what it does. So it tells us everything that we need to know about how to use this method if we comment it correctly. Right? And then press semicolon. All right, let's check this out, and we should get the same result, right? So let's Control F5. We kind of run this thing. Tom says hello. Okay? So going back to our lab, have we satisfied the says hello method? Yes, we have. Check. Right? All right, we need to do show age, and we need to create an age variable, right? An age instance variable. That's what we need to do here. Notice that we're not going to create any kind of public property for age, right? So age can only be entered where? Has to be entered somewhere, right? Because otherwise our age value is going to be 0, right? So you need to get the age from someplace, and the only place you can get the age from is from the constructor, right? Now I haven't said it here, right? From a constructor perspective, but in order for you to output the age, you need to get it into the constructor. Let's try this out. So we need another constructor, right? Right now, all we take in is name, right? So in our constructor, here's our person. We have two constructors: a person constructor, the main one with nothing, and then we give it a default value of unknown name, And we have another one that takes a variable, right, a parameter, a string parameter, that we actually assign to the underscore name. Hey, here's something. What I said before, even though we hadn't defined our methods, we could call our methods. Could I not use, instead of using this private instance of variable, could I use inside of my class, can I use my public property? I mean, it's going to assign it anyway, right? Could I not do that inside my class? And the answer is yeah, you can, right? Let me show you that. So, and there's reasons for why you'd want to use this as a public property and as a private instance variable, okay? But here's the example. This .name, capital N, right, is equal to, we'll say, unknown name, right? What is this really doing? It's not directly calling, like we said before, the underscore name private instance variable. It's going through our public string parameter, which means that I could do something like have other things happen inside these little braces than just setting or getting. I could do things like do some writing. Like, for example, when I set something, I could do a console.writeLine. Right, so let's do a CW. And in my console.writeLine, I can say name, underscore name value set. Right? Even though I never said to say that here, I'm using the name parameter. Because I'm calling my setter, I can do something else other than just set the value. That's why setters are so powerful. Getters and setters allow us to keep track of any transactions that happen with our data of our class, right? And additional things, like any kind of validation. I want to set a variable. I'm going to do this validation stuff with you one day. But I want to set a variable, as an example, for the name, a property. It's not required. We're going to do it, though, okay? A public property for the name. But we also want a public property for the integer, right? Why? For my age. Because can I enter an age of -1? No. How about an age of 10,000, right? It might be limited, right? You may have to vet what the user's entering in, right? So maybe the age can only be a value between 1 and something else, right? Because you can't have a 0 age. Person's not born yet, right? So we can do some validation here as well when we're setting things, not just when we're doing when we're getting information or whatever, right? Okay, so but now remember, just keep track that we're doing a console write line whenever we set the value of my name for now, all right? And here's what we're doing it. We're setting the value of our name in a couple places. One is if I use my person constructor, right? Or in my person, I'm using it right here. My first empty constructor, right? Right here. I'm actually using the name property, not the underscore name private instance variable directly. And again, I'm not doing that because I have more control. Let's do the same thing down here. So I'm gonna kind of go copy this, right? We'll put it down here, right? Just nice and slow for you guys so you can see this. Save. And hey, I can do it down here too. Instead of using it to set the name, I can also get the name, right? Because if I just use it this way, right, I can actually use this as the getter, right? It's not just the setter. So I get the property for the name, and then I spit out what the name is. So I can change what I'm doing here. By the way, this is way more safe. I'll put it that way. It's safer to do it this way using the public property compared to using the private instance variable because I have more control. Not because you shouldn't do it internally, but only because I can do other things when I'm getting and setting a value. Okay. All right. Let's do this now. Let's try this out. So we're doing the exact same thing, but we should get two outputs. One that says the property has been set, and the other one that says Tom says hello. Right. So let's just run it. Control F5. There it is. Name value set. So sometimes we do this name value set stuff in the console for troubleshooting. Right. We want to see that something's happening, right? We can put stuff in there to see, well, yeah, it's being set. It's actually going there, right? I'm getting to that part of my code. I'm actually using this, and that's why I use console.writeLine sometimes for additional help when we do debugging, right? All right, so this is working. Let's take that little piece of console write line out. We just use it just to demonstrate this. The reason why, so you can use these setter and getters, and I'm going to put this out to you again, as methods. Think about them as little short methods for each of my, the stuff that I'm using. Okay, I want to do a shortcut. I want to create a field, right? And by the way, I highly recommend, if you're using your own version of Visual Studio 2013 or 2015, highly recommend you get additional extensions, okay? Because it helps us build stuff. So if I go to Tools, this is something new, right? And if I go down to Extensions and Updates, there is a really cool extension that you can grab. If you go to Online, click Online. One of the extensions that's quite awesome for Visual Studio with C# is one that's called Snippet Essentials. Check this out, Snippet Essentials. All right, now, you may not have to do it now, but what it does is it gives us 700 plus snippets for C#, all right? That's built in. This is kind of neat, Snippet Essentials, because it gives us like a 1-character snippet, like for example, C, tab, and you get a whole class, whoop, right? And a bunch of other stuff. I have those snippets in place, and I'm going to do it just for quickness, not because I want to confuse you, right? So if I do something that you can't do, Snippet Essentials. And I did that by going through Tools, Extensions and Updates. I clicked on Online, and then I looked for Snippet Essentials, and then I'm just going to click Install. And when you do that, there's a bit of a dance the Visual Studio has to go through. Grab that snippet and install it. Now, if you don't have access to your own laptop and you're trying to do it on the machine in front of you, you can certainly do that, but next time you access the machine, it'll be gone, right? So please make, or it could be gone, depending on what we're doing. All right, so if that's true, if I have these snippets, I want to use a quick shortcut to create a private field, right? Private field for my snippet. I want to do it quick instead of me typing it all. Well, the snippet for it, if I'm not wrong, is, I think it's PF. If you look at it, it says private field. This is one of the snippets you can grab from the 700 snippets. If I do a double tab, it gives me a private field right away instead of me having to go private, right? It takes too long. So I want to make this, of course, an integer, and I want to name this field age, right? But it's going to be underscore age, right? There's my underscore age. And that's what my new private field is, right? So private int age, that's my new private. So I've got 2 private fields, right? Okay. Again, they're either called fields or private instance variables. So if I actually ask you what this question on a test or something, both names are correct. Private instance variables or private fields or fields in general, because you could have a public field and a private field. Do I ever want to use a public field? It's for best practices. No, I don't want to use public fields because I don't have control like I do when I use private or public properties. I could also use private properties. Instead of public, I could make this private if I only want it accessible inside of my class. Sometimes there's needs for this. Yes?
So every time you make a private instance variable, you have to create a public property if you want to access it.
If you want to access it outside of my class, right? Okay, so let's do that. Let's make a quick private property, public property, and I'm going to use a code snippet for that, right? I'm going to go down underneath name. Usually I try and do them in order. So if I do private instance variable name and private instance variable age, but notice that I'm not saying underscore age because we know what they are, age and name, right? We're just using the underscore to signify that they're private. That's all. It's not because I want to confuse you. All right. But if I look at that underscore, I know it's private. I know right from looking at it without even have to look. I don't have to look at the top of the class to figure out if it's public or private. I know if I use if it's underscore, it's private, right? All right. So I'm going to do prop. Let's type in prop. If I could type in prop, there's different ways of doing it. Notice that this one is part of it, the snippets. If I type tab, you can see that it says public int property. And take a look at this. It gives me get set, right? Now here's my property. I'm going to make this property, of course, the age property, right? And it says get set. Is this enough? Yes, it is, actually. This get set is a shortcut to write properties when I'm not doing anything with them like this. I'm not doing anything here. All I'm doing is getting and setting. So if I'm just doing this, This is the equivalent shortcut. You can just write it like this.
What if you're using the private instance variable? It's still,
Yeah,
so it would know what age.
it would know automatically.
Oh.
But you need to set, you have to know what to set it as, right? That's the thing, because my private instance variable isn't set. It's going to look for, to set something that is capital A, or the age, A, because we haven't set it up that. If I named it differently, if I named it underscore age,
Yeah.
and if I named it the exact same way as I named my instance variable, right, then it would be no problem, it would work,
Oh,
right?
okay.
But in this case, we can't use this because, but this is equivalent. If you want to make if you wanted to make a quick public instance variable, a public property with a similar instance variable, you could do that by using this method. We can't do that right now because we need to do it the longhand, and I want you to learn the long way anyway. So remember what we do. We add, in order for us to create a public property, we need to do a couple of things. One, define the name of my public property, which should relate to the name of my private instance variable. So age, underscore age, we know that age, capital A age, is what we're going to use, okay? Again, it'll vary according to which programming house you work for eventually, right? Let's do a setter, right, or a getter first. And in my getter, I want to do a return, just like we did before, this dot underscore age. This is where we use, for only one time, the instance variable, right? We're going to do it here, getter, in the getters and setters. And then we're going to do set, right, again. There's the long way, and we can do, again, we're going to set the other way around. We're going to say this dot underscore age is equal to the value that we're assigning it, right? The value is a keyword. So when we do an assignment statement with an equal sign, the value represents whatever we're assigning to it. That's what it is. It's not just some random value. Like, what does value mean? Value represents a literal or some kind of other variable that we're assigning into this public property. Okay, cool. Let's comment this thing because we want to know what this thing does, right? So we need a couple of things here. Because it's a public property, we need to do some commenting. And I'm going a little slower today just to get you to do that. We need a summary, so we do a summary. And summary. And inside my summary statement, if I actually type it properly, there we go. Then we have to kind of put in what this thing is about. Just like we mentioned up here, this is a property, a public property, so we want to say public property for our name field. This is a public property for our age field. This is a public property for our underscore name field, or age field, sorry. We could say, if we want to say, I'm being more specific, private is what we want to put in here. Private name, private age, so we know that it's public property. Think about, again, your public property as the face, the face of the celebrity. The celebrity is your instance variable. He never sees anybody. He sends his representative, right, his rep, the public property to talk to everybody, right? He never exposes himself ever. He's always safe in his house, inside the castle, inside the class, right? Or she. And we can't just say he because there's lots of female celebrities. Okay, cool. Now remember, we could also add additional things like at property string name, just so we know what it is. And this is what we can do here. This is for us. So at property, and this is int as an integer, and the name is its age, right? So that's the kind of property that we have. It's a property field. We're going to save this thing. Okay, we have age. We also want to create, might as well create the method since we're at it. And take a look. We have this method called says hello. You know what? Sometimes I like to do a little bit of additional comments, something like this, where I kind of put in, you know, a bunch of kind of a separator for us. It's just in my code. Now, some people don't like that. I put it in so that I can kind of separate my sections because my class can get pretty darn long, right? And an example of this is, here's my public properties, here's my private instance variables. You know what? So that's properties. And then down here, well, here are my constructors. So maybe I want to put that for all my constructors, right? So we want to kind of separate this. So we say constructors, right? Because sometimes there's more than one constructor. Often there is, right? We're going to make another one too, right? Here's my constructors. And down here, here's my, separate this a little bit. We don't want to do a lot of maintenance here, right? So here's my public methods. Sometimes we'll have another one for private methods, because we might have some private methods that we only want to use inside of our class to do specific things, right? So we have one public method called says hello. We want to make another one for our integer, right? I remember what it's going to be called. It's going to be show age, right? So I'm going to use a public method. Is there a code snippet for that? There is, probably. Let's see if you can't remember where the code snippet is for the shortcut. You can right-click, and then what you can do is you can click Insert Snippet, right? And then what it'll do is say, which snippet do you want? Well, if I want Snippet Essentials, let me show that again. I'll bring it up here so you guys can see it up here. So if I click on here and go Snippet Essentials, right? So I'll go Insert Snippet. And then I can choose what snippet I want. So Snippet Essentials is right here. I can choose what I want. A keyword, an operator, a statement. What do I want, right? It's not an operator. Maybe a declaration. That makes sense. It's declaration. Which one? An enum, whatever. Here's a method declaration. Here's the method declaration. There we go. What kind of method? Like, this is how detailed it gets. That's why there's 700 of these snippets, right? So here's an internal method. We want to make a public method, right? So we're going to go down to something that says public method, right? And look, they even talk about what kind of public method. Public method with a Boolean, public method with an integer. You know, which one do we want? I want a public integer method, this one, int32. So let's double click. If I actually click on this, it'll give me the shortcut, mi, for method with an integer, public, right? So let's try that out. So let's just go in there and type in mi, tap, tap, right? There we go, right? That's the kind of quick way to do it, as opposed to, you're going to go through, type public, and it's actually, I like snippets for a couple reasons. One, it's less finger typing errors, right? Snippets are like a cut and paste almost. That's what it is, right? All right, let's change the method name to something else. It can't be just method name. We're going to call this, thing show age, right? Show age. Now remember, it says it is an int. That's not correct. Actually, we're not going to return anything. It's just going to show the age, right? So it's actually void. And my method name is going to be called show age, capital S, capital A, because it's public, right? And what is it going to do? Console, well, CW, console.writeLine, and it's going to say this dot name using the public property plus is plus then the age, right? Which is this dot capital A age for the property, right? So all I'm doing is I'm taking three values, right? One of them is the name property. The other one is the age property. And then in between I have a string, and all I'm doing is smashing them all together to make my final statement that I'm outputting. Okay, that's what I'm doing here. So I'm concatenating all these three values to create my show age method. Okay, cool. This is a little method. Let's comment it because we're going to do this properly, right? So I wanted to put in my comments. Remember the first part, this is a new thing for us. We're going to put in summary. And in the summary, we're going to put in what this method does, right? And again, similar to what we did here, this method outputs the age value in the following format. Actually, an age and name value. Age, the name and age values in the following way. Following format. Well, I'm going to go into the next line here. And I can do something like this. I can say name plus is plus, you know, age. Am I almost done? I'm almost done. I have to also do something like years old, right? Age years old, which is years old. If I think I have to do one of these. I forgot that down here. See, that's what happens when you write a summary. Sometimes you remember what you have to do. Actually, it's part of our business requirements, which is what I'm talking about. Years old, right? So we're kind of concatenating this whole sentence. We're creating the sentence out of two values, right? So this name is this age, years old. That's what we're saying. And so this is our summary. We also want to say that this is an @ method, which is called, by the way, this is wrong. I have to change this up here. It's not say hello, it's says hello. Here, sorry, I forgot to do that. And this method is show age with a return type of void. Doesn't return anything. All right, so we have a couple methods, a couple of public methods, a couple of private properties, and a couple private instance variables, a couple of public properties that we're using. So it's not like we have a better, more robust class. It's not really, hey guys, this isn't rocket science here, what we're making. And I'm taking the time doing the commenting and everything else to show you everything. Otherwise, we'd be doing things much quicker, right? But let's take a look here. We've got, again, just to recap, 2 private instance variables, right? Now I've got to change this the class header too, because this is wrong, right? The other one is another field that I want to call _age, which is a integer type, right? That's what those things are. And by the way, I did it wrong. It should be the type first, followed by, this is just commenting style, right? So followed by the name of the identifier, right? So again, string, name, int, age. Those are the 2 parameters now are part of our class instance variables. Those are the data that we're holding everything. Here are our public properties. Again, I'm using these separators just for decoration, right? Don't go too crazy with this stuff. You can spend a lot of time decorating your code, and then it can still do nothing, right? So you don't want that. But it has to be something like this. We're using these summary XML tags here that'll be picked up by the compiler, so we get IntelliSense. That's what we're using this for, right? We got 2 properties. One, that's the name. The other one, that's age. They're identical, other than the private instance variables they're hitting, right? Then we've got a couple of constructors right now. We're going to add another one. One, that's a person constructor with just nothing. And you know what? We've got unknown name here. Let's add this dot age, right? We'll set it to 0 because we want to set it to something. So age originally is set to 0. And you know what? Inside this constructor, maybe we add some comments that says, you know, initialize private instance variables, or sorry, public properties. Public properties. You know, that's what we're doing. We're just initializing them to some value, so they're not completely empty. They're not null, right? They have a value, right? One is unknown name, the other one is age of 0. Doesn't make any sense, right? Age of 0 doesn't make sense. You know, and then let's keep going down here. Notice that we have this name, this person constructor only takes a name, right? And we can make another constructor. Remember, we talked about overloaded methods, right? We're gonna make another overload for it, right? Where the constructor has, and by the way, it's a public method, regardless of what you want to say. It's like a constructor, but it's public method. Hey, is there a snippet for that? So you can save us time to type. Let's look it up. We're gonna go insert snippet, right? We can look at, once you learn these snippets or whatever that work for you, you can look at declaration, right? Constructor, right? And then we can look at what kind of constructor, a private constructor, an internal constructor, definitely a public constructor is what we want to use, right? With the base class constructor call, no, we don't want to use this. Definitely want to do this one. So if I look at this one and if I hover over it, it's CC, constructor. All right, so let's try this out. So if I go CC, tab, what do I get? Hey, person. So it takes the name of my class and pumps it in there, right? And then I want to change my constructor. So it's not one of the constructors that I've already defined, because I've defined 2. One, the empty constructor or the default constructor. One, a constructor that has a string input. And now I'm going to define another one and one more, right? Just to give you guys another example. Here we're going to do an int age, so a local variable age for this constructor, and it's going to say this dot underscore, or this guy, sorry, age, capital A, age is equal to, right, the local variable age that comes in from the constructor, right? Hey, but what happens to the other variable? Like age doesn't have a value right now, so we have to do something like this. If we want to set the other one, this dot age, right, is still equal to 0, right? You haven't done anything there when you set the constructor. And the same thing goes with the name, right? So the name, this dot name, capital N, right, is equal to unknown name. That's still true, right? unknown name. Let's see if I typed it in the lowercase just to keep consistent. Yeah, I did. Unknown name. I'm actually setting the values here as I create I'm creating the objects, but I'm creating the values. Let's try this out. So I make a summary, you know, again like we did before. And here's our summary statement. And this is the constructor. We're going to copy this, copy and paste, just to give ourselves some information. This is a constructor that takes age as a parameter and passes it to the age private instance variable. That's what it's doing, right? Very simple, very same as what we did before. And there's two parameters. There's a constructor at constructor, so we want to keep that for our purposes. So we can see that it's called person, right? And then at param, we have another parameter, which is an integer parameter that we're taking in, which is age. Different constructor signature, different method signature, if you will, because a constructor is just another fancy method, right? It's a method. That's what a constructor is. But it's a special method. It's a method that's tied into the class, and it gets called as soon as you instantiate an object from that class. I want to keep saying that so it pounds into your brains. It's a special method. It's like it kind of follows the rules of all other methods that ever existed. You already know how to do methods, same as any other method, but it's a special method that gets called right away. And we can use it for things like initialization, right? Where we initialize public properties or private instance variables if you really want to, right? Lots of choices here. Let's do one more. Okay, one more constructor. So we're going to do a constructor. So CC, tab, and then this constructor is going to take both the name and the age, right? That's pretty, you saw that coming, right? So string, name, right? And then int age, and then inside this is another method signature. So that's another one. And what we're going to do is we're going to say this dot name is equal to name, right? And then this dot age, capital A, is equal to lowercase age, because these age and name are considered local variables for this method. That means they live and die inside this constructor. They never escape from this constructor. They're only local to this constructor method. Okay, good. Yeah.
How does C# know which constructor to call first?
It'll only call the constructor we use. If I use the constructor to create my object and I only pass in a name, it's going to use the name constructor. If I pass in just the age constructor. If I pass in nothing, the empty constructor. If I pass in the name and the age, it's going to use the name and the age constructor.
Is there any way you can just do that all in one?
There's also, remember we talked about, you can also use another constructor that adds in default values for age and name, like optionals.
Okay.
All the same rules we use for methods, we can use in constructors. Let's define this one. So again, so that we have a path, and gives you good practice to do the commenting, right? So here's a summary, right? And in our summary, this is just XML we're using now for C# only, right? And this is a constructor that takes age or name, both name and age as parameters, right? It assigns the local name value to the name property. Yeah, the details. I'm putting details in my comments, right? It assigns the local age value to the age property. Right? Now you could put in other comments in here, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to show you that you can be as creative as you like. Constructor person, and then parameter to string first, which is for name, and then a parameter for an integer, which is for age. And we don't return anything in our constructors. Constructors don't return any value. You can't have a return statement. Okay, whoa, we put a bunch of stuff in here. And we're gonna, by the way, I'm gonna pump up everything to GitHub in a second, a few minutes, right? But let's save everything and let's check it out in our program and see what we get. Okay, cool. We've got some additional things going on now, right? Let's make, so we made a person Tom. Well, person Tom says hello, right? And you know what? Person doesn't make any sense, right? We can actually call this person. Let's refactor rename. So if I'm going to refactor, by the way, the refactor rename is, you can do it here, rename. And if I change my person's name, in this particular case to Tom, you change to your name if you want. Press enter. So Tom, my name is Tom, right? I could also do another one. Let's try this other one. So I'm going to do another person, right? Remember, we're using the person class, which is a blueprint, and I can create many objects from that class, not just one object. Let's make a space here. So we'll say we'll do a console write line just to break it up a little bit. Right, that's how we're doing there. And we'll say, I don't know, we'll use another name, Mark, right, is equal to a new person as well. And this time we're going to pass in an age, right? So the age is, he's 30. And notice that when I do that, take a look. I have 4 different constructors. There's 4 overloaded constructors I can use. It says it right here. One is the person, and it tells you what it is. The second one is the age, which it tells you what it is. Then it hits string name, that tells you what it is, and then both, right, which is age and name and age, and it tells you this long, details about what it is, right? So you get quite a little detail, a lot of detail, depending on what comments you put in there, right? So now I can choose which one I want to use, and if I kind of hover up, I can say, well, I only want to use the one that has age. If I double click on this, then that's the one I use, right? So I go age, and I want to put in 30. So he's 30, so that's valid, right? And then I can do something like, but now I don't have Mark's name, right? And I don't have Tom's age. So I could do Mark dot, as an example, show age. I could do that. Remember, show age also shows the name. See what it says? This is the following format, name plus age. Does that, right? I could do this, but I don't have an age. Right now, the age is going to be 0. Sorry, the name is going to be unknown, right? Let me show you this, because right now we don't have an age and we don't have a name. Let's try this out. So if I've kind of run this thing, so Control F5, with the constructors that I've chosen, all right, I get this. Tom says hello, unknown name is 30 years old, right? Because I didn't set the name of my second object, right, to anything. I just named it here Mark, but I never really set the name property at all. So I can do that first. Before I say Mark show age, I can do something like Mark dot name. Remember, this is a public property, right? Is equal to Mark, right? I can do it this way. Here's 2, and then I can do the same thing. I can, before I say hello, I could set a value for Tom's age. Tom dot age, right, is equal to 47, right? As an example. There we go. Let's do another one. Another object. So I created a couple objects here. And I want you to ask me some questions after this, because I'm sure you're going to have them for understanding. I'm using 2 constructors, 2 different kinds of constructors. Here's the string constructor. Here's the integer constructor. Now I use the constructor that takes both a string and an integer, right? And they're all valid. Person, we'll call this Mary, right, is equal to a new person. And this time I'll use the name and the age. So we'll say Mary's name is Mary. Initialize it in the constructor, and her age is 23. I'm making this up. Now I can always do Mary dot says hello. I can do that. By the way, I can do says hello with all of them, right? I can use all the same thing. There's says hello. I can do this with Mary. I can always say Mary also shows age, right? And I can also here says hello from Mark. Look, Mark says hello, because they have access to all the methods, the public methods, right? Tom.showAge, right? They have all the same access to all the methods and properties of my class that I've defined as a blueprint for all of these objects. How many objects have I created here? 3, right? Mark, Tom, and Mary, those 3 objects, right? Each object has their own data for the properties and instance variables. So they carry different data. They don't share data amongst them, right? They're different containers, right? They're made from the same blueprint, right? But they're different. They're not the same object, okay? This is important to note. So when I create an object, it's independent of other objects made from the same class. However, they're all related. They're all part of the person class. I can identify them as all, I want to use the plural right now, as people, right? However, I don't have a people group, right? I don't have a people group. Could I make a people group? Yes, I could. It's an array. I can make an array of people. Oh no, not arrays again, right? I swear, I told you I wouldn't do this. I almost promised you I wouldn't do arrays ever again, right? No, I didn't. I could use arrays because I can create, instead of just making a string array or an integer array, I can make a person array. A person array with multiple person objects inside each cell. Each cell will have its own person object, right? A person array. That would be a different situation here than I'm doing here. So here's what I can use my constructors for. Just if you notice, what do you notice about the constructors? What am I doing with the constructors here? Just intuitively, what would you say I'm doing? What am I doing with the constructors? Tell me what I'm doing with them. I'm entering values, but what are the values doing for me? What are the values doing for me? That's what that's what the new keyword's for. I'm feeding in a value. When I feed in a value or parameter into the constructor, it allows me to initialize my name property or my age property, in this case, my properties. I can initialize them right in the constructor. Sometimes, if I make classes, I may want to do that. Other times, I may want to do setting the values outside of the class like this. There's one class we haven't hit. Let's do one more object. We'll do one above this just to give the complete example, right? So if I was going to do person, I will just call another one Tanya, right? Tanya. Again, it's a new person, right? But we're going to use the empty constructor. In this case, I can still use says hello and show age, right? But it doesn't make any sense for us to use these things unless I set them first. So what I need to do is something like this: Tanya dot age or name. I got to set the name value as Tanya, right? So Tanya, and I'm going to say Tanya dot age is equal to 28 as an example, and then I can do this with all assurance. Tanya dot says hello, right? I can do this. I mean, I could have done it earlier too. You're just going to give me unknown value and 0 age, right? And then Tanya dot show age. There's 3 or 4 different constructor calls here. 4 constructor calls. One to the empty constructor. One to a constructor that has a string only that I can set my name. One that I can do my age. One that I can do both. Why am I doing this? Why would I ever want to have 4 different constructors for a class? Flexibility. I can always say that the typical way we want to set things up is like this. If I have variables, I may want to set all of them like this or some of them, but there might be some variables that aren't required to be set right away. Like an example about, well, how much money does Tom make? I don't need that to know to create my Tom person, right? I don't need to do that, right? But I can always set that variable or that value later on. So I may not have a constructor from that. I may have a constructor just for age and name, and maybe I want to set my salary later on, right? So, you know, when we're constructing classes, it really depends on our business rules, what we're looking for when we construct a class, you know, in order for us to do this. Now, this is a very simple example here, right? But what we're doing is we're creating 4 different kinds of objects: Tanya, Tom, Mark, and Mary. We just named them so that they're names, right? But we still we have to assign values for name and age somehow, whether we do it through the constructor, whether we do it through public properties, or we do it by default inside the class, unknown name and 0 as an example, right? Somehow we need to set up the values for these properties. Questions? Let me just put this console write line and test this thing out so you can see what I'm talking about here. And there's my console write line. And if I click Control F5 for run without debugging, you can see that this is what I get. Tanya says hello. Tanya's 28 years old. Tom says hello. Tom is 47. Mark says hello. Mark is 30. Mary says hello. Mary is 23. And you notice that each of the objects is an independent object, all made from the person class. So they're related in that way, but they do not share data. All the data for each of these objects is unique. Yes?
In your lab requirements, you have mentioned that the name will be the property and the age will be just a private variable.
Yes, but you can.
Creating any property, how can you get the value?
You can't, right? That's why I'm showing you this right now. So I didn't tell you to do it, right? But it would come up with 0. Your age would always be 0 in my lab, right? But in this particular case, I'm telling you to put it in. It's okay to put it in as an extra thing. If you were to follow my example today and submit what I'm showing you here, the lab would be good, right? There's no challenge here for your lab. The lab for you is do what I'm asking you to do, practice what I'm putting together, do this stuff, and then you get your 2%. I guarantee you, guys and girls, there'll be some people who will not submit their lab. I don't know why, right? It's free 2%, right? For you to do the work. It's almost like doing homework together in a team. All we're doing is doing our homework in a group together. Let's do it together, guys. It's 2 free %. By the way, it'll offset the marks you'll lose. You'll lose some marks in your quizzes because you're going to get quizzes and you're not going to have the answers like we have here in the lab. But it gives you hands-on experience playing with C#. That's what I'm doing it for. It proves to me that you're doing stuff together, and that's why you're getting the marks. You're not getting the marks because I want to give you free marks. It's not like that. Do the lab, hand it in. If you do all the steps you're going to do it, you're going to get perfect, right? If you don't hand it in or if it doesn't work, you won't get perfect. Yeah.
I tried with the same property. I feel that a lot of errors and problems. Finally, I got a solution. I don't know, it is not a standard solution.
Okay. All right. So, but that's why. And that's why we're doing this together, right? So you know how to do it all. Okay. Any other questions around what we've done here? All right. Let's upload this to GitHub because it'll give you everything that you need. You can compare what I'm doing and then put your lab together. Now, here's what I don't want for your lab. Please do not duplicate my objects. Call them something else, right? Don't call them Tanya, Tom, Mark, and Mary. Call them your own names. Experiment a little bit, right? Be a little adventurous with your names, all right? How about that? And maybe you want to add additional information. Play around to learn. This is all your practice. This is what you're doing here. Because guys and girls, when I come to my exam, there will not be this kind of easiness. I'm going to ask you for something, and you're going to need to know how to do it, right? I'm stepping it together with you, so you're getting a gist of what you need to do, right? All right, let's do this together. So I'm going to go into my Team Explorer, and I'm going to go to Changes. And inside here, I've changed my person class and my program class. I'm just going to add these 2 changes into my setup, and I'm going to say something like this. I added methods, that's what I really did, and additional constructors the person class. All I've done. Commit. I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to go to sync, and then click unsync commits or push if you're using Visual Studio 2013. All right, once I've pushed it, now you have the latest version up online. You can always look and see if my code matches your code. All right. Again, I don't want you to copy. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to look at my code, try and understand what I've done, so that way you can always duplicate this later on. I'm showing you some good examples, just like we're doing the PowerPoint presentation together, of something that works in this class example, simple example. So again, the lab looks like it's free 2%, but I want you to really understand what you're doing here. So take a look at the code we've just written together, okay? That's what I want you to do. I know it sounds funny, and you're like, my God, he's giving me all the code for the lab. I'm getting a free mark. That's where your face almost said that to me, right? But it's not that. People will not hand it in. I guarantee you. So I'm not going to hand this in. I'm going to get some empty spaces inside my submissions. And I'm not going to get anyone handing it in until next week, right? Something like that too. Why? I don't know why, right? I don't know the motivations behind people. All I can try and do is make it as easy for you guys to understand, right? In simple terms. So please hand it in for full marks. Lab 2 due tonight at midnight. Okay? I'm going to pause here. When we come back, we'll talk about other things. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back and do other stuff.